All right, I believe that we are live with this. Hello, Sal. Okay, can Sal, because we're actually using my recording stuff today, is it okay if I do the promo for this? I have
Yes.
I have the wonderful pleasure of being able to get some advice from Sal Cordova, whom I met on Reddit, but who is actually kind of a big deal in real life, to talk about the current state of the creation evolution fight online, to talk about how to talk to other people and get them to listen. That's a terrible way of putting that, trying to get them to listen. How we can cultivate really wonderful conversations across epic divides, and how we can achieve truth together. Sal, thank you very much for coming on to this. It's not even a podcast. I'm talking about this as if like this is like a known entity or something like that. Wait, thanks for doing this video with me.
You're welcome.
You had been so kind as to look after we talked last week. This is a note for everybody who's watching this. This is a sequel to another video that both Sal and I are independently hosting on our YouTube channels. After our conversation last week, you've been so kind as to look at this proposal and that I put up on my blog, The Lost Tools of Learning, and I did a video of, and it's up on YouTube, for a bunch of contests that I am running now, and I guess we're technically started with that, and I've been so slow to do that because I'm overwhelmed with projects. But I'll follow through and I'll give money to somebody, whoever wins it, even if there's only one person who's entering it. That's fine. That's fine. For to try to cultivate some really great conversation betwixt the pro-evolution and pro-young Earth creation communities. Sal, what I want to do right now is present my soft belly to you and hand you a metaphorical knife and invite you to eviscerate me and to give me your radically honest feedback, especially the stuff about where this is not good and where this idea could be improved. I will be taking notes while you do this.
I'd say there's just one major suggestion. It is a big burden to say what will prove it or not. Even I will not, as I teach this discipline, I will say that I think this moves the meter one way or the other.
Yeah.
And research is ongoing, and we have to outline what experimental predictions will favor whatever outcome, because there's still a lot of tons of experiments that need to be done on every level, and I can identify. In fact, these are some experiments I'm involved in,
Yeah.
and so it's a shameless plug, and I would say that would be the main thing. And creationists, evangelists that I have dealt with have had too much of an attitude that, hey, if you're not persuaded with what I say in the next hour, there's something wrong with you. I'm just like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
These topics are so in depth, and that would be just a major one. I don't have any problem with at least trying to put this forward. And this is an interesting thing that you're doing, because even within the creation community, it's interesting how this is playing out, because they're competing models to solve the problems. I'd say there are three or four. Who really is counting? They're major areas where they're competing models.
I would like to count, actually. This is actually part of what I was hoping to get out of our conversations, subsequent conversations I have with the young Earth creationist geologists. I'm sorry, I interrupted. This is like the most fascinating thing in the world to me right now. Do continue.
The major problem in young Earth, it's not technically young Earth, but you'd say young cosmos creationism, is the distant starlight problem.
Huh.
That is, they're like, I stopped counting after about 13 competing models. And the vitriol people are expressing to each other. And there's also one thing that you have going for you, and I really mean this, is within the creation community, you end up having peer reviewers that are favorable to their pet models.
Huh.
So there's difficulty with objectivity. And in the absence of experiments, I'm a big fan of experiments to be able to see which one prevails. I've actually been involved in a laser interferometry experiment trying to look at the Michelson-Morley experiment under refractive environments. And this is not just by creationists. They're a secular professor. And also Ron Hatch, who I don't know if he's a creationist. He's a friend of my former boss, my present colleague and mentor, John Sanford. He actually is the author of the Hatch filter in GPS. He doesn't believe in Einstein's formulation of special relativity.
That's
And
interesting.
it's like, how did you get on the GPS Council? And I found out he's so respected because he's a pioneer of GPS technology. And he said part of it was because of what he discovered in GPS. So, I like experiments.
Yeah.
So that experiment that I was conducting with laser interferometry, it has significance eventually to the Department of Defense. So this is kind of exciting. Next on the list would be radioactive, radiometric dating. Despite what young Earth creationists say, even they will admit, and I've been to young Earth creationist conferences, and they say there's still problems in it. I'm just like, okay, so you're going to the public face and saying it's not a problem, and then amongst the researchers you're saying it is. I said I have a serious problem with that kind of marketing. I'm not saying it's necessarily nefarious, where maybe as we see in some organizations, the actual researchers are decoupled from the marketing teams, and I've seen. Like the business development guys promise products that we can't build. So I'm not saying that it's necessarily nefarious what's going on, but it does bother me that some of the stuff that is promoted by creationist evangelists is not in line with what the researchers are actually saying. And so there are problems with radiometric dating. And again, they're competing models there. It's not quite as severe as the cosmological distant starlight problem, but it's pretty bad. I would say one of the worst areas would be the flood modeling. You have catastrophic plate tectonics. You have canopy theory, which covers a different part of the flood model. And you have hydroplate theory. And it's led to some very interesting. There's bad blood within the creationist community. So, Brandon,
can you say those three again? The second was canopy theory. The third was hydroplate theory. What was the first?
Catastrophic plate tectonics. CPT. You'll see the acronym CPT. Catastrophic plate tectonics. And if you're wondering where I stand on all of these, I'm happy to give you those. But you are in a great position because you're not a creationist modeler, and therefore you're more likely to be less biased, and you could represent a secular audience. I actually wouldn't want creationists on your panel.
What?
I'm
suddenly realizing that we've done a terrible job setting this up, because it's very probable that people who are watching this will have no flipping clue what we were talking about with this, and this is why I should never run a podcast.
No, but this is the process of us trying to hash out kind of the details of how, if not this round, maybe the next round or something, where we would talk, because I'll give you a very powerful example of creationist peer review. This is so funny, and it's kind of, it doesn't cast the creationist peer review system in a good light. So I'm giving you some of the dirty laundry here, and I'm happy to do it.
Only if you're comfortable. I don't want to.
I am totally comfortable. People know, what you see is what you get, and it'll get me in trouble because sometimes I just speak my mind and my conscience. More importantly, my conscience. I will try to keep stuff private if it's going to adversely affect someone's, career, and it's sensitive personal stuff, of course.
Yeah.
But when I see something that I think is not helpful to the progress of truth, I think I'll speak up. So there's an invitation to present at the Creation Research Society, And in 2022, I submitted 2 proposals. And then I got back a note saying, and the one that I thought that was the most exciting was in bioinformatics, what they call structural bioinformatics. They shot it down. They said, no, you can't. We're really sorry to tell you, we don't, we have to decline your presentation. And I was like, what? This is like the most groundbreaking stuff in creationism. Well, it wasn't, but a few months later, the major elements of what we presented were published by Oxford University Press, a secular peer-reviewed organization. And I was like, what?
So you're
Can
saying
you
that you
hang on
actually
one
would've
second?
broke-
I need to shut a door. Hang on. Apologies, I'm having someone do housekeeping and it could get noisy. I had to shut the door to the room.
Thank you.
So I mean, I've told the CRS this, the Creation Research Society. I said this is something I don't like. How I'm getting to the point where sometimes the submitters are probably more qualified than the peer reviewers. So, I just wanted to say, I think what you're doing is going to be good because you can get secular guys to say, hey, we may not think all this creationist stuff is good, but we could at least say which we think is better. And I feel then the playing field is then a little bit more leveled where we don't have people with their own biases and their pet theories. So
This is great.
you asked for it. I gave it to you. Those were the elements of anything I had to say. I kind of like what you're doing.
I really appreciate this because I had not. I mean, one of my big questions to you is going to be like, how can we use this in a way to help the creationist community? All of my evolution loving watchers right now their eyes are rolling so far back in their heads they are going to need significant medical help, I'm sure. But this is actually something that I believe deeply in, that if you disagree with another community, the best thing that you can do as part of that disagreement is try to help them think through the issues that you see them having with this. This is a way that is actually helpful from their perspective to get clear about their ideas, and is also a way from one's outsider perspective of helping them see that their ideas are wrong. I hope that what I just said there was not did not come across as offensive or anything of that nature. But this is what I do with everybody that I disagree with, and sometimes, as a result of this, I end up changing my mind on things. One can only enter into this sort of I will help you think through these things with one's soul in one's hand, knowing that to do it well, you have to open yourself up to being changed yourself. So I'm going to ask that, but you've already given part of the answer for that. But for listeners who have no idea what we're talking about, I actually have a video that's up on YouTube now, a little 3-minute video, but I've posted about this at my blog, The Lost Tools of Learning, The Fossil Hunt and the Culture War. We're going to do 3, we as Science is Weird here, are going to do 3 different, contests coming up this month and then a couple other months. The big one that we're doing inside of Science is Weird is to give $1,000 to any student who can find a fossil in the place that it should not be according to the usual standard mainstream geological, paleontological models. That's one for just inside of the community because we don't want people... hoaxes are a potential thing that people could do. Also, people running around on other people's property and finding fossils and stealing fossils. There's a bunch of legal issues there that we didn't want to open this up to the world for. In the future, maybe we'll find a way of being able to do that. But 2 that are open to everybody is, 1, to make the best case for a worldwide flood. So this is to find a piece of evidence. To have a piece of evidence, you don't have to have it in your hand. It can be something that you have read about online and say, okay. For example, a polystrate tree. For example, mega sequences of rock. I'm finding out about on the Young Earth Creationism subreddit. And then the final contest is to make the best model for a flood that helps explain the evidence that we do see. Like, for example, the fact that the we find the fossils in a very, 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 very specific order. We never find T-Rex bones in the Jurassic or Triassic or anything after that. We only find them at the very end of the Cretaceous, the Maastrichtian. We never find, I don't know, trilobites, right, in the most recent layers. And this was like the thing that got me to stop being a young Earth creationist when I was in high school. I got into young Earth creationism in 8th grade. It was actually the thing that got me really excited about science, the idea that you could actually have a giant model of the world that can really explain like everything. Where I got this like whole feeling of the excitement of science. And then in that creation evolution debate, the idea that you could find like one small piece of evidence that could totally upturn everything that everybody else believed, right? It was like romantic science at its highest. But then I got out of it because of this. And I could actually verbally wander for a little bit and say some very nice things and some very bad things about different aspects of the young Earth creationist community. Sal, here, to put a cap on that, one of the things that even when I was planning this whole series of contests, that I did not understand was that there really was what I'm now referring to in my own mind as a top shelf young Earth creationist scientific community. The only young Earth creationist ideas that I'd ever heard were the stuff that was peddled by the likes of Ken Hovind, Ken Ham, Gish, Henry Morris, that sort of thing. And it's really bad science. It's not even science. It's not even evidence. It exists in mostly like ignorance of actual evidence. It survives as memes. And when people would tell me that, well, actually, if there are young Earth creationist journals, like I rolled my eyes very hard. And now I find that there's like this existence of this like these people in the young Earth community, and you are one of them, who actually take evidence seriously and admit when like the evidence is not in your favor, like when there's a lack of models. And I love this. I only love this. And given that some of the rest of your community seems to be going into even worse places. I just recently saw the Candace Owen "Dinosaurs Didn't Exist and Were Gay" interview that she gave last summer. This is a thing now in in conservative Christian circles that like, no, actually dinosaurs didn't exist, and I'm almost verbally quoting here, or literally quoting here. Isn't it interesting? Isn't it funny that the only people who ever find dinosaur bones are paleontologists? Or people who are related to paleontologists. And you're like, oh wow, like the conspiracy theorizing has taken over everything at that point. I would love to help the responsible members of your community. So, with all that said, feel free to react against that however you would like, including to the knife is still in your hand, but like, how can I help your community?
There's definitely a top tier that is extremely quiet, partly not because you can't find them. It's just that they're busy doing real science, meaning they have very successful careers in the secular world. And, the secular world knows about their creationism, but they're so good at their field that they continue to remain in it. One of my colleagues, well, obviously John Sanford, but he was an evolutionist for a long time and then became a young Earth creationist. And I think I mentioned that he's in the late 80s, early 90s, he's one of the top genetic engineers on the planet. His work is featured in the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. He was so good. Cornell research professor, then became, I would classify him in the top tier. Some of his stuff on anti-evolution, the wording is written a little bit too much for the popular audiences, and sometimes I've had to dispute and say, hey, John, don't say that. You're going to get us in trouble. And it's been a back and forth, and I publicly said he gave me permission to publicly disagree with him, and I'm doing that a little bit more, but some of the criticisms that I have said publicly of him eventually got incorporated in peer-reviewed work, so I'm very grateful for that. We co-authored stuff. We were able to get through some of our differences and publish. So That's one type. Another one is Marcos Eberlin. And he has, in the science world of citations as chemists, he has one of the highest H indexes. They call that the H index. So that would be Marcos Eberlin. 1,000 peer-reviewed papers, which is just insane, and probably 200 graduate students. There's a chemical reaction called the Eberlin reaction. So that would be top tier. There's another one who's a heart surgeon, Dr. Robert Matheny. He has FDA-approved procedures that can regrow heart valves. And he was on my channel, and he was saying, we were talking about the long ages of the patriarchs in Genesis chapter 5, and he said, that's thoroughly believable. So there are probably others, if I think about them, I could start to list the names. I mean, there's one former evolutionist, very famous, John Elquist, who flipped sides and became a young earth creationist. But he's ignored. I mean, one of the reasons is some of our work is so technical, people just are like, we don't understand it. And I know that I worked on one project, I said, Dr. Sanford, I think only 30 people on the planet would know or care what we just wrote. I spent a year on it. It was on nylon-eating bacteria. And it's just not, it doesn't have that wow factor for most creationists, but it was very serious work. I don't know if I already mentioned Joe Deweese. He's a rising star in the field of enzymology, particularly topoisomerases. So there are more and more of us starting to matriculate, but these names are not on the forefront. I mean, everyone knows Kent Hovind and Ken Ham, but the actual researchers in these fields are not, who have great secular achievements are not well known. I'm kind of at the very bottom of the secular world. I mean, I don't have any H index or anything. I'm probably better known as somewhat of a popularizer, but I'd like to think I'm approaching the top tier as far as the science, but I certainly will not have the publication or academic credentials at this stage in my life that someone like Marcos Eberlin does. I mean, to be frank, not even a lot of secular scientists have achieved what Marcos Eberlin has done. And there are probably some other ones that have, I've not had the chance to mention that even sometimes, there's some names that come across my desk that I've since forgotten that are huge in the secular field, or young earth creationists, and I would consider them top tier, but they're busy doing their work in the secular world. So I don't know how we got on that topic, but there's definitely a disconnect, and it's sometimes frustrating because I see people like Kent Hovind, and they the other side, the evolutionists, will presume I'm just like him, and I'm very not. It's very embarrassing to be associated with him.
Wow. Okay, I have a couple questions to ask you. One of them is, here, I'm gonna ask the meta question, and then I want to ask a specific one to attack it. The meta question is, like, how can we flip this? How can we make the good young earth creationists the ones who actually are known, and maybe I'm presenting that as if it's a personality thing, but maybe good young earth creationist science, the one that actually plays honestly with the facts instead of systematically denying them. How can we make that one the one that is known? And then the specific question that I have as part of that is, if you were in my situation right now and you wanted to do the most good for the young earth creationist community, and you were doing this project or this series of projects, what would you do? Who would you tell about this to? How would you publicize this? How would you make this resilient? You'd already mentioned that you would not put a young earth creationist geologist on the panel for adjudicating this, which is shocking to me. I was thinking that is actually one of the most important things that I could do in order to get good faith amongst the young earth creationist community. So I mean, I had to really rethink that. But like, what would you do if you wanted to do the most good possible, and you were me?
I've been asking that same question, and I don't think I have great answers. I can only speak for myself, which I will do shortly. What may change this is just to have actually um, uh, more people who are successful in the secular world to come out of the closet, and some of them are starting to come out of retirement, which is, coming into. Entering retirement, and
Sure.
so now they're free to speak. Of course, and this is also happening in parallel in the ID community, which happens to have lots of old Earth people, but they're probably closer to the young Earth side in terms of intelligent design, and so some of these, and so what can change the culture is really just having more numbers, having more numbers of people matriculate through the system, becoming successful professors, and then retiring. But then even in the process, some of them are a little bit starting to come out of the closet even during their secular careers, if they're successful enough. So there's not an easy answer. There has to be a demographic change. And what may fuel that actually is, I've watched the young Earth creation issue unfold over both the intelligent design and young Earth creation issue unfold over the last 45 years. The thing that has happened has been, there's been a lot more that we know now than we ever have. And even in the secular world, they've started to question evolution, which isn't the same as young Earth creationism, technically, but it has kind of made a climate that invites questioning. And then some of these people will go on to study young Earth creationism within their own field. And so this is, I don't think there's going to be an easy fix. I don't think that there's anything we can strategically do. It just has to have kind of happen by itself.
Okay.
Where people may come out of a homeschool environment, might be trained in some sympathetic young Earth creationism, but then don't have an experience like you. I would prefer that they go in it with an open mind, and then if they're qualified in chemistry and physics, and I'm meeting more of these who are studying physics and chemistry, and for whatever reason they have decided that young Earth creationism is something worth pursuing, and then they have good secular jobs. I think that will move the needle. And as that happens, maybe it will start to matriculate in mainstream science, which we'll see if that can happen. There's a lot of cultural momentum to have to overturn. So, for example, I do meet some petroleum geologists who are like, well, they may say you need old Earth to find oil, but you can still... I've met them. There's an interesting debate among the petroleum geologists who are young Earth creationists. They said, well, it's not actually essential. You just have to know, like, the certain kind of microfossils you're dealing with. But it doesn't mean you have to believe the Earth is old. You do have to accept that the microfossils are indicators of where to get oil. And I'm like, okay, this is an interesting discussion. So that was a long answer, like the meta question. And then your second part, if you can repeat it after your meta question, I'll try to address that.
Sure, but I also just want to say thank you for that. That was really interesting, and I have been wondering, like, what is going on with petroleum geologists these days. I went to a little local, growing up in Milwaukee in the early 90s, a little showing of a local petroleum engineer who was a young Earth creationist and came to speak on that. I mean, so the meta question, which is how can this be flipped, which you said a lot of, I think, very wise things about, right? Science, at the end of the day, is this magical method for getting things done, and it's also a deeply human thing that is kind of, like, where do the cool kids in 8th grade, which lunch table do the coolest kids in 8th grade sit at, and who can sit closest to them, right? A very sociological sort of thing. The follow-up question to that was how can this thing, these contests that I'm doing, with a $100 cash prize, I need to say to everybody out loud, Someday, if we ever redo this, I'd love to crowdsource this and get a heck of a lot bigger cash prize. But I'm not rich yet. How can this be helpful for doing that? For flipping this and calling more attention to good young Earth creationist science?
Well, as far as specifically your project, I think it's a step in the right direction, and I know your jaw must have dropped when I said I don't want a creationist on there. It would not serve, it would be, okay, so let's say they're going to say it's all bad. Say the panel says these are all bad, but this is the less bad. That would still be better.
Yeah.
Okay? They say we still reject it, we're not convinced, but this one had at least followed what was closer to the way an argument should be formed. And he at least cited evidence, and he had conclusions based on the evidence. He stated his assumptions, how the experiments or observations support his viewpoint, and say, okay, which among them is the less bad. And I think if you're subject to the most harsh criticism that way, it'll probably improve the quality of what goes through. If you get the feedback from them and you don't take it too personally. I've thrown stuff up on the internet really to get feedback from people that hated my guts and hated everything I stood for. And they've done an enormous service of giving me free of charge editorial review. I said, I can't believe you've given me all this free of charge editorial review. Thank you for pointing out this contrary study. I know I won't say that again. I won't use those phrases. They said, that quote never existed. And I say, thank you. And you know what? I could pass that on to my listeners and my students in good conscience. And I say, hey, look, there was nothing to complain about anything here. And sometimes it's gotten to the point I would just cite mainstream literature. Seriously. I'll say, you probably didn't know this, but this evolutionist said that. Now, I could be accused of quote mining. That'll always happen. But that happened recently in a discussion about racemization with a evolutionary biologist. And I just quoted peer-reviewed literature. I said, look, I'm on the right side of this debate. I'm not quoting creationists. I'm quoting experiments and accepted literature and accepted theory. When, I would put on the metrics, how much did you quote accepted textbook experiments? How much have you quoted accepted fluid dynamics? And this would apply to anything. What experiments do you propose that will distinguish your model from anyone else's? Or at least state whether an experiment is even appropriate to be able to distinguish your model from others. Because that's the one thing I see is that there are a lot of experiments that need to be conducted on numerous scales to be able to prove people's points, and we're not quite there. Sometimes the money is just, the grant money from either the government or private industry just isn't there to conduct experiments on an interesting question, and sometimes you just have to get lucky. So I'll give you one specifically for flood modeling. There was a proposal twice given at the International Conference of Creationism that said, hey, we want to do stuff with where we take sediments, mix them in water, and pump them through a flume and see if we get stratification. Do it at various speeds, different sediments. You can modify some other conditions. They said we would be the first. And we only need about $250,000. There are no donations. I was livid. I said, people are spending $200 to $400 to go to the Ark Encounter.
That's exactly where
millions of dollars. I said, the one thing that would really help us, you're not doing, and that is experiments, doing research. We had the opportunity to be number one in sedimentology if you would just do this.
Yeah.
And I was livid. I said, so I'm going to get myself in trouble here. Oh my goodness, but that's okay. I'm going to get myself in serious trouble. I said, Ken Ham is going out there saying this is really important to build this big box of wood. and charge people $200 to $400 to bring their families to look at this big box of wood.
I had no idea it was that expensive.
And tens of millions of dollars are going into this. The one thing that would really help change the narrative is if we did an experiment. But that is risky because the experiment could go wrong and it doesn't give you the results you want. But that's science. And so you probably saw me, I posted on Reddit that there's a decline in attendance at the Ark Encounter.
That was true. I saw it this morning.
Yeah, you saw it. I saw you
I didn't
there.
realize it was you. Okay.
That was me who put it up there. And people are probably wondering why I was gleeful. I'm just like, okay, this is a move in the right direction. Stop.
Honestly, the first thing that I thought, because I didn't click on it, I saw it right at the end of my time at the gym. To keep this part of my life not from taking over all of my life, my rule is that I can only engage when I am on a treadmill or a recumbent stationary bike at my gym. So I happened to see it right as I was getting off the treadmill. But my first thing was like, these danged evolutionists, right? They're just like taking all these pot shots at like look at the suffering of creationists. But no, Sal, that means a totally different thing when it's actually like the criticism is coming from within that community. I love that.
Yeah, one of the first posts they ever upvoted, in fact, it's the #1 post for the day at Debate Evolution. It was by me. Now people are wondering what's Sal up to. I have said this before, and I've been very upset because when I was suffering through doubts about young earth creationism, all I could hear is all the condemnation of the skeptical people like myself about young earth creationism. I was a friendly skeptic, meaning I'd like to believe this, but you're not really delivering the goods. And then you get a condemning finger from Ken Ham that if you don't assent to this 100%, you're in there with the murderers. I mean, this is
Wow.
There's one graph where he said if you're not a young earth creationist, you're all these evil things. I was livid. I was livid. You can still find it on Answers in Genesis somewhere. They don't emphasize it as much, but I'm just like, yeah, maybe because it's bad for business. I don't know. But I was like, then you're going to accept donations to build this big box of wood. Does that settle anything? This is more like indoctrination than actually than answering difficult questions, which I sincerely had. And I have, I know personally, and not just myself, we want to carry out experimental explorations on various fossil things, and we don't have the money to do it. If we got even a fraction of what's wasted in Ark Encounter, or a fraction of what's wasted on these seminaries and these evangelical movements where money is just fraudulently pocketed, and I know this because I've been involved in a court case that tracked this down, and we know that there are $1 billion being in court records of stolen money, that evangelicals are just throwing money at stuff that they don't know because they think they're doing God's work by donating to this cause, and it's like these are fraudulent causes. So I'm on my soapbox here, and you're saying what can be done, and I would say it begins with cleaning up the churches and seeing what are real good priorities. If truth is very important to you, you should be willing to risk putting money on experiments that may not give you the results that you want.
Can you say that again? That was so good. If you believe that the truth matters, then you should be willing to spend money on experiments that might not even show you that what you want to believe is true. I'm twisting it, and I'm not trying
to invest money on experiments that may give you results that you don't want to find, that you don't want to hear. You're going to put yourself on the line. And, because anything short of that, where's the integrity? And so there is the quote-unquote safe thing to do if you're just trying to persuade people is not to explore the evidence. It's to indoctrinate them.
Yeah.
The risky thing, but the more credible and believable thing is if you put yourself out on on a limb and say, okay, this is my flood model. This experiment will be falsified. I mean, this experiment will falsify or affirm one component of my flood model. And one criticism of one of the flood models is anytime they got into a difficulty in their model, they would invoke a miracle. And I just laughed. I said, certainly I invoke miracles for the origin of life. But that's not too far from what secular scientists themselves have said, like Francis Crick, the origin of life is almost a miracle. So, okay, but if you're going to invoke a model of fluid dynamics and tectonic plate movement, and then your model starts to fail and you'll fix it with a miracle, I'm like, there are two possibilities. You have to justify why a miracle really happened versus just because, well, my model won't work if I don't have a miracle there. So I'm just like, okay, maybe you might want to reconsider whether your model is accurate. How many miracles are you going to admit to make this thing work? And I'm not opposed to putting a miracle there, but what I'm saying is if you're trying to represent this as a testable model that can be subject to real scientific scrutiny in terms of predictions, it's like the more miracles you have to invoke, the more questionable the model is. For creationism, we do invoke the miraculous creation of life, and I'm fine with that. And I can give a host of reasons why I think it's legitimate. But this catastrophic plate tectonic thing, it's like, how are we going to judge a model where anytime you have a serious problem, you're gonna throw a miracle at it? Wouldn't it be better if you had a mechanistic explanation in your model to explain things? And if your model is wrong, try a model that has fewer and fewer miracles that you need to invoke. So
is this
I know I'm
controversial?
gonna get.
Is that controversial at all inside of your community?
Catastrophic plate tectonics?
No, I mean,
Depends
like,
on
just like the idea that, like, because I didn't even know that was the one you were talking about, but like the idea that your theory should have as few miracles as possible, that a stronger theory is one that requires fewer miracles.
Well, I mean, that's just kind of like common sense, really.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, wouldn't you want your model to have the most independent verification possible? That even someone who's not on your side will say, hey, that's really good. There are some very interesting things we could do. We could repeat experiments such as helium and zircons. Now, it's been back and forth about whether it's a good clock. And I'm like, hey, that's cool. I appreciate the skepticism. There might be ways we can improve the controls or whatever. Or we could find other things that would be less controversial. Stick your neck out there and see what happens. So some of these theories are like, okay, so now your theory, like the heat problem of Earth, suddenly you're going to invoke let's not even go to miracles. How about non-repeatable events? Like suddenly there was accelerated nuclear decay that there's no way we could ever repeat. I'm like, okay, even if it was naturalistic, this is like, well, you begin to say, well, how can you can just invoke that to fix anything? You might not say it's miraculous, but it's like, well, that's such a singular event. How are we ever going to prove it except through circular reasoning?
Yeah.
So,
this opens up this whole new view, maybe for me, of when we're talking about top shelf creationist geology. That are these people aware that that's bad to do?
I'd say the proponents of it don't appreciate it. They don't appreciate me saying that, and I would say some of them don't seem to get it. And it's gotten to the point where I just don't want to have conversations with them. They don't like my approach, and the bad feelings are there on both sides. But if I may introduce one thing, there have been, as I said, in the 45 years, there's been a lot of developments. For young Earth creationism, one of the biggest developments was buy an old Earth person, Mary Schweitzer, when she discovered soft dinosaur tissue. And there have been other researchers, but even slightly before then, there have been some discoveries in the fossil record. Because we've improved our chemical methods, we're able, it's now at least, it is an open scientific question why there's certain chemical signatures in dinosaur soft tissues. Not that they're soft, but things like that why are there still alpha peptide bonds? For myself, why are the proteins not fully homochiral? I mean, why are the proteins not fully racemized?
Okay. Racemized
And why
means oxidized?
racemized means, okay, so proteins by and large, and I mean by and large, like 99%, is left-handed amino acids.
Okay.
That has this is a nice science experiment since you're interested in science. Pasteur discovered when you take a homochiral substance and pass polarized light through it, it'll turn the polarization when it goes through it.
Okay.
It's only one condition. That's a very exceptional condition. And what happens over time is the proteins start to flip spontaneously. It's a quantum mechanical thermal thing that will make them both half left-handed, half right.
Sure.
Left-handed is an L amino acid. Right-handed is what they call a D for dextro amino acid. And then when you pass that polarized light through, it's not going to have that rotation of the polarization.
Interesting.
So it's a very definite state. And what we have found, it was a very contested study, but this is something I've been encouraging creationists to do, dig up fossils and determine the racemization state. And I started to ask one of the world's top chemists, I said, how expensive is that? And that was James Tour. This is on record, by the way, on some video somewhere. He and I were talking about this. I said, Dr. Tour, we'd like to examine the racemization state of these fossils.
Yeah.
How expensive is that to send off to a lab? He said, well, this is not my specialty, but if they're charging you more than $150, you're going to the wrong lab. So when we were talking to petroleum geologists, I'd like to have access to some of these core digs and look at the shells. And then I need to talk to biochemists and whatever kind of other biologists and say, okay, how can we get a nice, good sample here that we wouldn't consider contaminated? Take the protein, do what James Tour said, send it off to a lab. And this is an ongoing project that I've had. And I'm just like, where's the funding? Even $10,000 would get us a lot of mileage. I mean, for $150 for this? I said, that's one ticket to the Ark Encounter. How many thousands do you have? So, so where was I going with this? What has changed is that there have been some empirical developments that, if it weren't for that, honestly, I don't know that I'd still be in the Young Earth movement. I would have said, look, where's your evidence? Where's the beef?
Yeah.
What do you have? And if all I've gotten is this little morsel to keep me going, it's like, okay, that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
And then I'll continue, but I'm like, this is high risk stuff, because what happens if you dig there and you find out, oh, it isn't what you were thinking, and like, oh man, back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
So, but that is, that's why I consider it important that even my work is subject to scrutiny by hostile reviewers. Even if they reject it for publication, I want to see if I feel that they have been fair, if they have given me information where I think I can legitimately say I think they made a good criticism, and is there any way that I can improve upon it? And for that reason, I have published in secular peer review. It was very difficult. And I've gotten recently invited to publish even more. Some people that run secular journals are like, we're impressed with your work here. We're inviting you to publish. And I'm just like, well, that's great. It may not be overtly pro-ID or pro-young earth creationism, but these would be important experiments to carry out. So, this thing about racemization, I'm going to try my best, if we carry out this experiment, to report the measurements accurately. And if it doesn't give us what we want, we're going to report that. My conscience would bother me if I knew that it gave one indication, but my audience and my donors and supporters wanted a different. I would still tell them, look, this is the truth. I'm sorry, it didn't give us the result we were hoping.
Yeah.
That would be the. I could go to my grave knowing I told them the truth and I wasn't living a lie. That just I couldn't live that way, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm just not that sort of person.
I have two big questions for you. And one of them I would, if you're willing to meet another time, I would love to ask, I'd like to make the entire conversation about it. And I have a smaller, I don't know, more gossipy question for you.
Please. I love the gossipy questions.
It's super, I thought it was a really productive conversation on the subreddit, debate evolution, asking whether young Earth creationist leaders, and here I'm talking about the non-top shelf ones, because I think that's the only ones that community of pro-evolutionists really knows about. That's not entirely correct, but I think it's mostly correct. Whether they know that they're spouting garbage, whether they know that the things that they're pointing to as defeaters for evolution and so forth and so on old Earth, whether they actually understand that they do not check out or not. And almost everyone in my memory of this, on that thread, said that, yes, they do know and they're knowingly lying about that. And I was very skeptical of that. The human ability to deceive oneself, there's a good Feynman quote to this effect, should not be underestimated. The most important thing is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. And so I make sense of how Hovind and et cetera, how they're going around still saying this stuff that I saw disproved, decades ago when I was a high schooler, that they are just in their own little bubble, and they have built up mental defenses against any objections to this. And they know, or some deep piece of their psychology knows that they would lose their jobs if they were to flip on some of these things. So they're not even able to kind of bring these up into critical understanding. And maybe that they don't even understand what actually is required to have a truth claim pass muster. Where do you stand on this? Do these people understand that they are spouting nonsense?
I would say a certain segment of them do. I would put Kent Hovind in that. I would put Kent Hovind in that category. I'm less inclined to put other people, maybe because they're just stupid or don't understand, or their thinking process is not at high standards. The reason I would put Kent Hovind there, he was bragging about his great marriage, and I have credible information that his fourth wife has left him and divorced him, and the papers have been filed. There have been other things he said. What's the age group of the audience watching this, by the way?
I have no idea. This is actually developing the YouTube channel for Science is Weird. Adults.
Well,
adults. Sorry.
Okay. I guess you could edit this out, but his wife was threatened by a gun.
Oh gosh.
By one of his employees, and one of his employees is Kent's buddy, and he didn't stick up for his wife on that gun. The excuse he gave was that was kind of the guy's private parts in a certain state. Okay. And I'm like, you got to be kidding. And people were believing him on that. I said, that's such an obvious lie that she saw something in the guy's pocket that she deduced was a gun.
I'm understanding.
Okay. You don't need to go into the details. But I said, look,
Arkansas,
this is such a bold...
Kentucky? What state are we talking about here? So, got it.
I said, this is such a bald-faced lie, and people were still supporting in the young Earth creationist community. and saying, Sal, you're attacking a man of God here. I'm just like, no, he's not. That's a bald-faced lie. Not to mention, he has been convicted of domestic violence against wife number 3. And I'm just like, okay. And then wife number 4 leaves him. I'm like, okay. And then you hear this story of how, you just hear all the stuff that is just made up coming from his mouth. Nothing to do with creationism. Without even blinking an eye, he'll just make stuff up. So definitely for him, I wouldn't trust him. As far as the question as to does he know it's bad, he doesn't care. What matters to him is whether he gets donations. And so definitely, I mean, he's a convicted felon, 42 counts, okay? 42 counts.
Financial stuff, or?
Yeah, financial.
Wow.
And
there's been
so there's a criminal. There's unfortunately, and I've seen this. Why am I so harsh? I've seen a criminal element in the churches, bilking them for billions of dollars, and people let them get slapped in the face, taken advantage of, and have their money stolen. And I'm like, okay, so you kind of like, I know why this happens. It happens because people want to believe that the people they think are heroes are really heroes. The thought that they've been scammed is too difficult to bear, so they just keep sending donations. But I've seen this happen, particularly in the evangelical world, where someone poses to be a holy man and he's not. And billions of dollars are being scammed this way. So, by way of extension, to the extent someone is kind of this is an evangelical movement. We want to evangelize, so science comes next. You count success in terms of how many donations and how many people have come to your viewpoint. You're not taking priority of whether this is true or not and how credible the evidence is. And so, going back to your question, how much of it is well known? I don't know. I'd say 10% are probably crooks.
Wow.
The other 90% are just incompetent. I know that's really mean to say, but I've been around the block enough times to see what goes on, and I don't like it.
I'm an optimist, and I am hopeful that amongst the 90% that you dub incompetent at this, I chafe at that characterization. I think that there, IQ is a thing, right? Like there are some people who have a better natural ability to do analytical reasoning more than others. I'm not denying that. I'm really hopeful that people who right now, of those 90%, if we're using those numbers, that don't understand this stuff can be led actually to understand this stuff. Actually, just through, I'm sorry, I'm getting some weird video lagging problems. Hopefully it's not in the recording. I just threw up a thing on the subreddit and on the evolution subreddit of a beginning of a proposal to help explain evolution better as through using the techniques of narrative. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. I don't want to end this video on the idea that people are just not able to understand this sort of thing. Can I give you the question right now that I would like to ask you in the next time that we talk? Mm-hmm. Or do you want me to save it as a surprise?
Go ahead. No. I could, whatever answer I give, I might have to reconsider and refine it later, but this is a good time to give it to me, and then, if I have anything to amend it, we can do that. So please.
Oh, here, then no, because then I don't want to do that because I need to run actually right now. So then let me not give it to you right now. If you
All right.
If you, like me, would need to answer it right away. I'm seeing that the same device struggling to record. This may be due to okay. This is another good reason to end this right now because my computer is having a hard time of this. This has not ever happened before. Okay, I will then leave this right here and leave this on a cliffhanger. Sal, thank you so much for doing this with me. I've loved this.
You're welcome.
All right. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.